So this bike is a 1993 CB750 F2 and it has an RC42 engine. Now this model pretty much ranges from around I think 92 all the way up to about 97. So the idea of this video is to try and get these pod filters to fit. What I'm using is the DNA XVI series pod filters, but I'm pretty sure across the board you can make most of the DNA filters do the exact same process that I'm going to show you. So what actually stops these filters actually fitting is the fact that the carburetors are so close together. The other thing is the actual backbone to this model runs right down the center there. So your first step is to actually take the oil off the black rubber. This is real slippery, so you're going to really struggle to try and get it to fit nicely because it's just going to keep wanting to actually slide off because that rubber is just completely coated in that oil. I know DNA have a special oil that they make themselves which is designed for not going milky when it gets wet, but we'll get that off first and then we'll go from there. All that I'm going to use for this is just a cheap degreaser. I think that'll do the job perfectly. There is a little bit more gap between the two carburetors that are in the center compared to the outer two which are really close together. I'll show you from the top. So you can see the gap here between the two center ones, and then obviously there's no gap really at all. So that's where we're having the problems, trying to get these to obviously minimize the hitting on here and trying to do something to stop them from rubbing here. So as you can see here, the rubber flange is about 17 millimeters that I have to play with. And if you look at the flange here, where it actually sits on, is only about 9 millimeters. So it's only ever going to seal 9 millimeters. So the extra flange is kind of, it's there for, I guess, in case the thing was to rattle around and move a little bit, then you have a little bit of play. But what's happening here is it's hitting on this bowl down the bottom. It's pretty open up the top and around the sides, but it's actually hitting on the bottom. So what I might do is I might trim the flange. First thing I'm going to do is try and stop as much stuff going in on the inside of this filter as possible, and also just give it a trim. So you might be able to see on the inside of this filter where the little ribs are, where those little rings are. I'm going to go to pretty much the first ring and test it, see if it works, and then just keep going to the next ring and the next ring until I'm happy with that placement, because that'll do two things. It'll bring this filter in, which may foul less on this, because right now this is pretty much just this side of the center line of that tube, the actual backbone. So this may be hard to see from the camera, but that filter is actually sitting on an angle, tilting out, exaggerated I guess, like that. So that's because it's hitting this. So first things first, let's trim that ring down and see if we can get that thing to sit a little bit closer to the carburetor so it doesn't foul on the bottom of this bowl here. So it was touch and go there for a second whether it was going to fit. As you can see, one side is now done. I'm pretty stoked with it. What I did to make this happen is, as you saw, I trimmed the flange down here. I obviously plugged the hole so nothing got on the inside. The idea originally was to put masking tape on the inside, but that didn't work. It just wouldn't stick. So I made that little plug, I guess, and then put the clamp on, tightened it up, and nothing got in there at all. It's like perfect. So I trimmed it here, but across the bottom of the bowl, actually I'll show you on the other side. So where the actual rubber flange comes around here, from about here to here, I actually shaved a little bit more off the bottom section than I did around the rest, just so that it cleared this, because this part here actually sticks out more than anything else. So I just made this pretty much the part where I spent a little bit more time. One thing that I will mention that I did do was I got a bit of rough sandpaper and just pretty much roughed up the inside here, just to make sure that, you know, it wasn't slippery, because even though I have taken the oil off this, it is like a silicon rubbery compound and it's super slippery anyway. So by doing that, it's just made it so it's nice and firm. Once the clamp's gone on, she's not going anywhere. The almost impossible CB750 to try and fit pod filters to has been completed. If you have this same model motorcycle and you want to use the same pod filters that I'm using, and you don't have like a belt grinder or a belt sander or anything of that nature, I'll tell you another way that you can possibly get away with doing this. Just keep in mind that it's the second line down is where I've cut. So see if I can zoom in. So not that one there, but this one here. That line there is where you cut. So once you make sure you can put a plug in there, put the clamp around it so it's nice and tight like I did, and then just cut that line really slowly. Just sit at a bench somewhere and just go along with a Stanley knife and just cut it as best you can. And then once it's cut, put some sandpaper flat on a bench and then just do this until it's completely flat. This stuff isn't really that hard to sand, and that'll get the same result as what I've got. Obviously it'll take a little bit longer, but you'll get the same result as what I've done. And then also, like I said before, just make sure you cut that little bit at the bottom so that it fits nice and flush where this bowl is at the bottom here. And I'll also leave a link to the DNA's website where you can purchase these exact model pod filters that I'm using, which is the XVI series. One thing I will do before I get too far ahead of myself is take these guys out. Just in case I do decide to turn this engine over and forget about these, I'll take them off and I'll leave these guys on now that I know that they fit.